Welcome to Sleep with Myth. Close your eyes and let the world fade away. Tonight we drift beyond time, where gods dream and stories remember their light. The night the sky forgot to sparkle. Long before anyone learned to name the constellations, before sailors trusted stars more than maps, and before prayers were ever whispered upward, there was a night when the sky simply dimmed. Not all at once. First one star went out. No one noticed. Then another, and another. Villagers in the valley of Haroun thought it was nothing more than thick clouds, or tired eyes, or the ordinary moods of the heavens. Stars surely could not grow weary. They were thought to be the lanterns of gods, lanterns that never slept, never faltered. But week after week, the sky's silver dust thinned. Children who had once counted falling stars before bed now stared at the night, confused by how empty it felt. Lovers who had promised each other forever beneath radiant constellations now found their vows reflected in a ceiling of dull, faint pinpricks. In the highest house of the valley, where the hill met the wind, lived a girl named Illyra. She noticed first, because Illyra was not like the others. She did not listen mainly to voices, to laughter, to storms, to waves. She listened to silence, and she swore one late autumn night that the silence above her had changed. It no longer felt like a blanket, felt like a held breath. The girl who could hear quiet. Illyra's world had always been a quiet one. She lived alone with her grandfather, Elder Wren, in a small home made of pale stone and driftwood, perched at the edge of the cliff where the valley dropped into a sea of mist. By day, the village of Haroun was filled with humble sounds. Hooves on dirt, looms clacking, bread ovens opening and shutting like warm, sighing mouths. By night, those sounds softened into murmurs, and another sound took over, the sky. The people of Haroun believed the stars had their own kind of music. You couldn't hear it with your ears, but if you lay still enough and breathed slow enough, you could feel the faintest tremor in your bones. A kind of humming, a soft, silver rhythm in the dark. Illyra had grown up learning to listen for that hum. Her grandfather taught her. Most people only hear noise, he'd say gently, tracing patterns in the air above her bed. Farmers hear the clatter of tools. Traders hear coins. But some of us, Illyra, some of us are born to hear the spaces between sounds, the silence that holds everything together. As a child, she didn't understand. But as the years turned, and the village remained the same, and the seasons looped in familiar circles, Illyra found that what she remembered most were not the festivals, or the harvest songs, or the market shouts. She remembered the pauses, the way the world seemed to inhale just before the first snow, the stillness between waves crashing on the distant shore, the breathless moment when a lantern was blown out and darkness waited to be filled. And above all, she remembered the gentle, steady silence of the star sky. It was that silence that began to change. It grew thinner, not loud, not broken, just emptier, like a song that had forgotten some of its notes. Illyra would lie awake and strain to feel the old, humming presence of the constellations. But the sky, once filled with murmuring starlight, felt quiet in the wrong way, quiet like an exhausted voice, quiet like a light fading in a room no one realized had gone dark. One star left. The first time Illyra saw it, She thought she was dreaming. She had gone to the cliff's edge late at night, as she often did, wrapped in her grandfather's old cloak. The valley behind her was asleep. Only a few scattered windows glowed faintly. The sky above looked incomplete. Huge patches of it were empty, where once there had been shimmering rivers of light. She frowned, hugging the cloak tighter around herself. "It's too quiet," she whispered to the wind. "It's like they're gone." The stars, if they heard, did not answer. But something else did. At the farthest edge of the sky, right above the line where night kissed the mountains, one star shivered. Not flickered. Shivered. Its light trembled like a candle in the path of a breath. Illyra's chest tightened. There it was. It was brighter than the rest, burning with a strange, soft blue-gold color, as if it carried dawn and dusk together in its tiny heart. Every other star around it had dimmed to near nothing. This one burned on. "Why you?" she whispered. The star trembled again. It was such a small movement, such a subtle change, that anyone else would have dismissed it as imagination. Illyra didn't. She could feel it, not with her eyes, not with her ears, with the quiet. The silence around the star was different, not empty, not fading, expectant, as if the entire night were leaning toward that single light. The story of the silent lantern. She ran home through the dark, cloak flapping behind her, heart pounding, the cold biting at her cheeks. Her grandfather was awake, as always, sitting in his rocking chair by the hearth. The fire was low, more ember than flame. He looked up when she burst through the door. "Illyra," he murmured, half chiding, half relieved. "Out on the cliffs again? You'll catch the wind in your bones one day." "Grandfather," she said breathlessly, "the sky. There's only one star left that truly shines. The others are fading. Can't you feel it?" Ren's eyes darkened just a little. "I had hoped you wouldn't notice so soon," he said quietly. That made her freeze. "You anew." He patted the chair beside him. "Come, bring another log for the fire. This is not a story to tell in the cold." She obeyed, though her impatience buzzed like a trapped moth in her chest. When the flames rose a little higher, throwing gentle shadows along the stone walls, Elder Ren began to speak. "Long before Harun was built," he said, "before these houses, before this valley had a name, there was nothing but mountains, wind, and a single temple carved into the side of the world." "A temple?" Illyra whispered. "A temple of silence," he corrected softly. "Not the silence of fear, not the silence of the grave, the silence before the first word, before the first star. In that temple," he continued, "there lived no priest, no king, no god wearing a name, only a lantern. The word hung in the air between them, weighty and luminous." Illyra leaned in. "What kind of lantern?" Ren's eyes reflected the firelight. "Not one made of iron, or brass, or glass. Not one lit by oil, or wax, or fire. It was a lantern woven from the first hush that fell over the world, when everything paused, and waited to see if existence would continue." Illyra shivered. "Empty." "Not empty," he said. "Ready. The old stories say that before there were stars, the sky was not dark. It was quiet, and in that quiet, A single lantern hung from the unseen rafters of the world, swinging slightly with the breath of creation. He paused, letting the image settle. One night, when the silence was deepest, the lantern did something it had never done before. It breathed. Illyra swallowed. And stars came out, the light born in silence. He closed his eyes, as if seeing something beyond the walls. They did not explode into existence with thunder and chaos, he said. They drifted out like gentle sparks, like sighs exhaled into the infinite. One by one, each star floated from the lantern's unseen mouth, took its place in the sky, and learned to glow. They were alive? Illyra whispered. In their own way, Ren said. They were lights born from silence, and so they glowed with a quiet fire. Not the wild, raging blaze of suns you hear about in other lands' tales. Ours were softer, kinder. He shifted in his chair. But power always draws hunger, he added. And silence is always the first thing threatened when the world begins to speak too loudly. What happened? Illyra asked, her heart thudding. People forgot, he said simply. They built cities. They filled the world with noise. Wars, markets, shouted names, declarations. They praised the stars, but never the silence that had given them birth. The lantern grew dim in its hidden temple. It had one last breath, one last light, a final star it could send. Illyra's skin prickled. The star I saw, she whispered. Ren nodded slowly. The stories say, when almost all stars fall asleep, when the sky is more shadow than sparkle, the lantern will breathe once more. It will send out a last star, a seed of all the others, and someone, somewhere, who can still hear silence, will be called to find the lantern before it goes out forever. He opened his eyes, looking straight into hers. Illyra, he said softly, tell me what you felt on the cliffs tonight. She could barely form the words. She closed her eyes. Like the night was waiting. Like the quiet was holding its breath. Like something small and far away was asking to be heard. Ren's shoulders sagged with a mixture of sorrow and pride. Then it is true, he murmured. The lantern is on its last breath. And the last star? She whispered. He nodded. You saw it. The call in the quiet. The room felt smaller suddenly, as if the walls had leaned in to listen. What does it want? Illyra asked, voice shaking. Ren studied her carefully. Perhaps, he said slowly, it wants not to die alone. That's all? She whispered, startled. Would that not be enough? He asked gently. To have your final light witnessed? To have your last breath heard? She looked down at her hands. Silence settled between them, not heavy, not cold, just present. But I think, he added after a moment, that it might want something else as well. What? To leave one more light behind. The words sank into her like stones into water. She thought of the empty sky, the fading constellations, the single trembling star, far from all others. What can I do? She asked. I'm just a girl in a valley. Ren's gaze softened. You are a girl who listens when the world is quiet, he said. And sometimes that is the only difference between those who pass through stories and those who become part of them. He reached behind his chair, From the shadows he pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. "I had hoped," he said quietly, "that I would never need to give this to you, that the lantern would keep breathing, and the stars would never falter. But the night has chosen otherwise." He placed the bundle in her lap. Her fingers tingled as she unfolded the cloth. Inside lay a lantern. At least it resembled one. It was small enough to fit between both of her hands. Its frame was made of some pale, unidentifiable metal that seemed not to reflect the firelight but to absorb it gently. Where glass panes should have been, there was only air, clear, untouched. It was empty, utterly, perfectly empty. Yet when Illyra leaned close, she heard something inside it, a faint, delicate sound. Not a voice, not a hum, a breath, like the quiet exhale of someone asleep. "What is it?" she whispered. Ren smiled sadly. "A copy," he said. "A reflection, a fragment." "Of the lantern?" she asked. "Of its silence," he corrected. "This lantern cannot birth stars, but it can carry the echo of the place where they were born. If you bring it to the true lantern, and if it still has enough breath left, it may choose to place a last light inside yours." Illyra's throat tightened. "What would that do?" "Perhaps nothing," Ren said. "Perhaps it will be only a comforting gesture, a way for an old lantern not to fade alone." He paused. "Or perhaps," he whispered, "it will give the world one star that will never go out." The path to the silent temple. The fire in the hearth had burned low again. Outside, the wind moved gently along the stones of their little house, carrying with it the smell of distant pine and snow. Illyra clutched the empty lantern. "Where is the lantern's temple?" she asked. "In the mountain," Ren said softly, "carved into the spine of the world." "That's north," she said. "Yes, far, farther than you have ever walked," he replied. "But not so far that a single quiet soul cannot reach it." She looked at him. "You knew this day would come." He nodded. "In every generation we listen," he said. "We watch the sky. We pass down the story, just in case. Most centuries pass without a sign. But now, the stars are almost asleep, and you heard the quiet change." She swallowed. "Will you come with me?" He smiled with aching tenderness. "My legs are older than the mountains now, little one. I would only slow you down. This path is for those whose hearts are still made of unwritten time." Her hands shook around the lantern's pale frame. "What if I fail?" she whispered. Ren leaned forward and cupped her cheek with his wrinkled hand. "Listen to me, Illyra," he said. "No journey toward the heart of silence is ever a failure. If you walk with an open soul, the world will remember you, whether the stars do or not." He pressed his forehead lightly against hers. "The lantern called," he whispered. "You answered. That alone has already changed the story." The last night before the journey. Later, long after Ren had gone to bed and the fire had died to soft red coals, Illyra sat awake, the empty lantern resting on the table before her. The house was silent, not the hollow silence of absence, the full, layered silence she loved. She heard the faint crackle of cooling embers, the slow, steady breathing of her sleeping grandfather, the whisper of wind beneath the door, and above it all, faint but there, the changed quiet of the sky. She stood, lifting the lantern. His weight was strange, not heavy, but present, as if she were holding a promise. She walked outside one last time. The air bit at her skin. The ground felt crisp beneath her feet. She stepped to the edge of the cliff and looked up. The last star burned far above, its light trembling with an emotion she did not understand. Loneliness, perhaps, or hope. She raised the empty lantern toward it. "I hear you," she whispered. "I don't know how to help you, but I'll try." The star shimmered. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw it pulse in rhythm with her own. The silence around her deepened, wrapping itself around her chest like a careful hand. In that hush, she felt something, not words exactly, not instructions, but a direction. North, toward the mountain, toward the old temple carved into the world's spine, toward the lantern that had once breathed stars. Illyra lowered the lantern and held it close to her heart. Tomorrow she would leave the valley for the first time in her life. Tomorrow she would follow the call that only silence could carry. Tonight, she stood at the border between her old life and the next, wrapped in a cloak, holding an empty lantern beneath a nearly empty sky. Above her the last star watched, and far to the north, in a forgotten temple where silence had grown thin and tired, an ancient lantern drew in the faintest of breaths, as if preparing one final time to exhale. The mountain that held its breath. Dawn came quietly to the valley of Harun, not with trumpets of light or bold streaks of color, but softly, cautiously, as if even the sun was uncertain whether it should speak. In a world where the stars had begun to fall silent, Illyra rose before the first glow touched the rooftops. Her cloak lay neatly folded on her bed. Beside it, the empty lantern waited, still and breathlike, pulsed faintly, not with light, but with presence, a kind of listening, as if even the lantern awaited what she would decide. She took a long breath, feeling the weight of the unknown settle into her bones. Then she lifted the cloak, wrapped herself in its familiar warmth, and placed the empty lantern into the small leather satchel her grandfather had helped prepare. When she stepped out the door, the world was hushed, the kind of hush that comes before the first snowfall. She turned back for a moment. Her grandfather stood in the doorway, leaning on his cane, wrapped in a thick shawl. The early light carved gentle lines across his face. "You're ready," he said softly. "No," Illyra whispered, "but I'm going." Ren's smile trembled with pride, as all who are chosen must. He reached into his sleeve and pulled out something small, a thin silver thread tied around a tiny stone carved into the shape of a teardrop. "This is the last whisper stone of our family," he said softly. "It carries no magic, just memory. If the silence grows too heavy, hold it, and remember that you do not walk alone." Illyra closed her fingers around the stone. "Thank you," she whispered. Ren touched her cheek gently. "Go with a quiet heart, and may the lantern see you." Then the door closed like the final line of a familiar song. Illyra turned north, toward the mountains, toward the temple, toward the source of the fading stars, and she began to walk, the road where sounds slept, the path out of Harun wound between frost-touched fields and ancient stone walls. The deeper she walked into the northern woods, the more the silence changed. It grew thicker, heavier, alive. The deeper she went, the more she realized. The mountain was awake, and it was listening. She placed her palm on a pine tree. The silence pulsed like a heartbeat beneath her hand. "I'm coming," she whispered. The first test of quiet. Hours later, soft footsteps followed her. Not threatening, curious. A loom wolf stepped from between the trees. Small, white-furred, eyes glowing like molten gold. It watched her, then turned, walked away, stopped, looked back. She followed. The wolf guided her through hidden paths, over moss older than memory, past stones carved with half-buried runes. At last it led her to an arch of ancient stone. The Spine Road, the oldest path in the world. The loom wolf bowed its head, then vanished as silently as it had come. Illyra stepped through the archway, into colder air, thinner winds, deeper silence. The mountain breathed, and she continued. The climb grew harder. Stone cracked beneath her boots. Icy wind carved strange songs through narrow ridges. The lantern in her satchel remained warm, like a sleeping heartbeat. By dusk, she reached a ledge and looked up. Only one star remained. The last star, flickering, lonely, trembling. "I'm coming," she whispered, and for a heartbeat, it answered. The spine of the world. Night swallowed the mountain. Silence thickened. Then she saw it. The silent temple, carved into the peak, crowned by clouds glowing faintly with silver shimmer. And above it, the last star burned brighter than she had ever seen. She stepped forward. The silence changed, tightened. A moment brushed past her like a cold ribbon, a sliver of time fallen out of place. The lantern warmed sharply. The last star flickered in alarm. Whatever waited inside the temple was running out of breath. She steadied her breathing, held her lantern close, and crossed the threshold into the temple of silence. The moment Illyra stepped into the silent temple, the world behind her vanished. Not physically, mountains, sky, and path still existed, but the sense of them dissolved, as if a curtain of stillness had fallen between her and everything she knew. Inside, the air felt different, heavier, softer, alive. A presence moved through the silence, curling around her like something ancient and aware. Her footsteps made no sound. The lantern in her hands warmed, as though recognizing its birthplace. A long corridor stretched before her, carved from pale stone veined with silver. Runes glowed along the walls, patterns of spirals, circles, and echoes frozen mid-air. Each rune she passed dimmed softly, bowing to her presence. The corridor opened into a vast chamber. Pillars rose like frozen echoes toward the ceiling. Along the walls stood hundreds of mirrors, but none reflected her face. Instead, each mirror reflected a moment of silence she had lived. Snow falling for the first time. The breath before saying goodbye. The night she first felt a star disappear. Her grandfather's hush before laughter. Her childhood self listening to the sky's hum. Each mirror shimmered with memory. She touched one. It was warm. Then a deep vibration filled the chamber, a hum so low it trembled through her bones. The mirrors flickered, then went completely still. Silence thickened, and within it came a whisper without sound. Forward. The mirrors dimmed, their purpose complete. A spiraling passage led deeper into the mountain. The silence shifted, gaining rhythm, a faint pulse. The heartbeat of the lantern, growing weaker. Illyra hurried. The passage opened into a circular chamber. There it hung, the lantern of the first silence, suspended in mid-air, woven from shimmering threads of nothingness. Breath, memory, hush. It glowed with a fragile, trembling silver. Too fragile. Flickered, dimmed, struggled. Illyra stepped closer, breath shaking. "You're fading," she whispered. The lantern pulsed faintly. She lifted the smaller lantern. It vibrated like a child recognizing its parent. For a moment the first lantern brightened, then dimmed again. Tears filled her eyes. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'll listen." Silence wrapped her gently, and the lantern spoke, not with voice, but with feeling. Images poured into her mind, stars drifting out of the lantern's breath, constellations forming, worlds awakening beneath their glow. Then noise, cities, shouting prayers, forgetting silence. Asterisk, each voice took a fragment of me. Asterisk, she saw stars dimming one by one. Asterisk, now only one remains awake. Asterisk, the last star, trembling, alone. If I fade before it returns, the sky will remain dark forever, the silence said. What must I do? Illyra whispered. Asterisk, bring the last star home. Asterisk, she stared at the lantern in her hands. But I can't reach the sky. Asterisk, you can. You hear silence. You carry its breath. Asterisk, how? She whispered. Asterisk, when the last star falls, catch it. Asterisk, her heart froze. It will fall. Asterisk, all stars return to silence in the end. Asterisk, the chamber trembled. The lantern dimmed dangerously. Illyra's grip tightened. I'll bring it back. I promise. Silence wrapped around her like an oath. The lantern breathed one last weak pulse. Illyra turned and ran. Somewhere far above the world. The last star had already begun to fall. Illyra sprinted out of the silent temple, her lantern clutched to her chest. The last star in the sky burned too brightly, a trembling, uneven light that felt like a heart losing its rhythm. The sky cracked. Shimmering fractures spread across the darkness like broken glass, and the single remaining star pulsed violently. It's falling, she whispered. Please, not yet. But the star trembled again, and the heavens groaned. The lantern in her hands grew warm, urgent, pulling her toward the highest ridge. She ran. The climb was brutal. Knife-edge paths, sheer drops, wind slicing past her skin like cold fire. Every pulse of the star sent ripples through the world, bending light, distorting sound, stretching moments into strange, trembling shapes. When she reached the ridge's crest, the wind disappeared. Everything froze, even her breath. The last star split open in a rain of gold-blue shards, falling too fast and too slowly at once. A scream stretched across eternity. The lantern pulled at her again. She ran. Light tore across the sky like a river of burning dawn. Every falling fragment whispered against her skin, soft, feather-like, but sharp enough to cut the world. The star dipped lower, lower. Its brilliance cast trembling shadows across the peaks. Then, time broke. A soundless pulse shattered the air. Wind halted mid-motion. A pebble hung suspended, halfway through a fall. Only Illyra could move. Behind her, something appeared, a faint outline of a figure made of fractured seconds, a being of broken time. It had no voice, yet she felt its intent. Move before time remembers itself. She swallowed. I'm going. The moment released her. The world crashed back into motion. She ran. The falling of the last star. The sky tore open as the last star descended. A column of white-blue fire pouring toward the mountain. Time flickered. Paths split and rejoined. Her footsteps landed in futures and pasts she couldn't comprehend. But she kept running. The plateau opened before her. The star hovered, a trembling sphere of impossible light, begging, screaming, collapsing. Help me. Illyra lifted her lantern. Light exploded. The star folded into itself. Fire becoming thread. Thread becoming spark. Spark becoming a trembling core. It shot toward her. The lantern opened. A breath of ancient silence. The star struck. Warmth flooded her. Dawn itself seemed to pour into her veins. Her knees buckled, but she clutched the lantern, now glowing with a soft, fragile radiance. The last star rested inside it, weak and fading, like a child seeking comfort. Above her, the sky was empty, truly empty. Darkness deeper than any night she had known. Illyra trembled. I have you, she whispered. I won't let you go out. But from behind her, from the far edge of the ridge, something whispered back. Not wind, not silence, not time, something else. A presence that had noticed. The last light being removed from the sky. And it had begun to move. The darkness that learned to walk. Illyra knelt beneath the vast, starless sky. The lantern in her hands glowed faintly, the last star trembling inside it like a fading heartbeat. You're safe, she whispered. I have you. But the wind had changed. Something was watching her. Not an animal. Not a spirit. The darkness itself. It shifted like a living thing, low and hungry. The lantern warmed suddenly. A voice, thin and soft, slipped into her mind. Do not look at the dark. It notices when you do. She gasped. You can speak. Not with sound. Sound is too heavy. The star's light flickered. You carry me, so I can speak through silence. Are you in pain? She whispered. I am ending. Her heart clenched. No, I'll bring you home. I promise. The star dimmed sadly. Hope grows thin, but it tried to brighten for her. Illyra rose and began walking toward the temple. The darkness behind her shifted again, not with footsteps, but with awareness. Shapes formed from the blackness, tall silhouettes with bending limbs, faces smooth like cloth stretched too tight. They had no eyes. They didn't need them. They felt hunger. What do they want? She whispered. To take my place, the star answered. The shadows moved closer. Star, can they take you from me? Yes. Fear surged in her. The nearest shadow turned sharply toward her. Fear is loud, the star hissed. Quiet your breath. She inhaled slow, exhaled silent. Her heartbeat softened. Her fear thinned. The shadows drifted back into the mist. The night that ate its own name. The pass between the cliffs was crawling with darkness. Not creatures, possibilities. Forms the night had forgotten it could wear. Illyra heard the star speak again. Without stars, the dark becomes what it once was. What was it? Hungry. She swallowed. Then the darkness spoke back. A voice woven into the night. Child of silence. Illyra froze. You carry what once belonged to night. Return the fallen light, and we will let you leave unchanged. She said nothing. The silence strengthened around her, shielding her. We will meet again, the darkness breathed. Then it faded. Illyra nearly collapsed, trembling. The lantern pulsed against her chest. Will the darkness follow us? She whispered. Yes. Can the lantern protect us? I do not know. Her heart ached. What chance do we have? If silence chose you, the star whispered. It chose you for a reason. Illyra stood, wiping tears from her face. The wind shifted. The mountain trembled. She tightened her grip on the lantern. The silent temple was waiting, and the darkness was learning to walk. Illyra climbed toward the silent temple, the lantern glowing faintly in her hands. The last star trembled inside it like a dying ember. Behind her, the darkness followed, shifting, watchful, hungry. We're almost there, she whispered. The temple weakens, the star murmured. Hurry. The mountain trembled beneath her feet. The night felt heavier than ever before. The entrance runes had nearly gone out. The mirrors no longer reflected memories, only pale shadows of stillness. Illyra reached the chamber. The great lantern of the first silence hung dimmer than a fading dream. Its woven strands sagged, its glow barely alive. I've brought it home, she whispered. The lantern did not respond. The star pulsed weakly inside her hands. Then, a whisper of movement. The darkness had entered the temple. Shadows crawled across the floor, forming tall, eyeless silhouettes. Child of silence, the darkness breathed. Return the fallen light. Walk away untouched. It doesn't belong to you, Illyra said. All light is born from us, the darkness hissed. Without stars, the world remembers what it once was. What was it? She whispered. Ours. The shadows surged. A dark limb struck toward her. The great lantern flickered, its last spark extending to shield her. The star cried out, Illyra! She pressed the smaller lantern to the first lantern. Take it, she begged. Please. Nothing happened. The star dimmed further. Illyra, it whispered. Let me breathe. She remembered her grandfather's words. Some of us are born to hear the silence that holds everything together. She inhaled slow, steady. The world stilled. She exhaled and gave her silence away. Warmth flowed from her chest into the lantern. The star brightened, rising for the first time instead of fading. The smaller lantern opened. The last star drifted upward and entered the first lantern. Silence exploded outward. Every shadow dissolved in a soundless scream. The mountain shook. Light burst through the roof. The sky, empty and grieving, flared with new brilliance. Stars awakened. Hundreds, thousands, a river of light reborn. Illyra fell to her knees, exhausted but smiling. You came back, she whispered. The final star pulsed warmly overhead. Thank you, Illyra. The great lantern dimmed peacefully, its purpose complete. A quiet like sleep filled the chamber. The world that dreamed again. Illyra stood. The smaller lantern was empty now, but warm. She had given her silence to the sky. She did not regret it. Outside, the world glowed under newborn starlight. The sky hummed again, soft, gentle, like a lullaby remembering itself. The journey home would be long, but she was not alone. The stars watched her. The last star carried her quiet into the universe. "Good night," she whispered, and the sky answered with light. Thank you for listening to Sleep with Myth.